Hi everyone, welcome back to Visually Hidden Selects. I'm Peter O'Brien, and today I would like to talk to you about The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, from 2001, directed by Peter Jackson, and starring Elijah Wood, Sean Astin, Billy Boyd, Dominic Monaghan, Orlando Bloom, John Rhys-Davies, Sean Bean, Viggo Mortensen, and Ian McKellen as The Fellowship of the Ring. This is, of course, the first film in a series of 3. It's based on a book of the same name, written by J.R.R. Tolkien and published in 1954. And surprisingly, this is the first film adaptation of this story. The script for this film and its 2 sequels were written by Peter Jackson, the director, and his wife, Fran Walsh, along with Philippa Boyens, and they did condense some characters, they repurposed some characters and some situations, but for the most part, the core of the story is completely intact, and it is brought to life in such an exceptionally beautiful way that really holds up 23 years later. If you're just coming into this series, this film is a very accessible gateway into the realm of fantasy as well as Middle-earth. This film was shot simultaneously with its 2 sequels, The Two Towers and The Return of the King. It was shot over a 14 to 16 month period beginning in October of 1999 and going to the following December. And then they did subsequent pickups over the course of the next couple of years while the films were in post-production. They filmed it entirely in New Zealand, and they utilized a lot of national parks in New Zealand, so even the setting is real. They did, of course, do some stuff against green screens, but for the most part, a lot of it was filmed on location in New Zealand, and any of the stuff they did film in the studio was still done in New Zealand, so this film is 100% exported from New Zealand. When you watch all 3 films, you'll see how they cross-cut and jump around into different areas, and so not everybody is in the movie all at once at the same time in the same location. So because of the broad scope of this film, they were able to shoot them simultaneously. And some actors were not even cast by the time they started rolling. In one specific situation, the character of Aragorn, played by Viggo Mortensen, he actually came in as a last-minute replacement because the actor they did hire was not working out for the part. And so they brought in Viggo Mortensen, who basically took the flight on Friday, got to New Zealand, got in costume, and was shooting on Monday. And he does a phenomenal job. I cannot exaggerate that enough. And this was really his star-making breakout performance. He had been in a number of films from the 1980s up through to this one, but after this one, he really got recognized for leading man potential, and he did a number of films with David Cronenberg, he did Hidalgo, and it's all because of this performance in Lord of the Rings. It was just fate and luck finally caught up with him and his talent. This is my personal favorite of the series. I love how it's set up, I love how the characters are introduced, and it really has more of an adventure feel to it, kind of the way you think of like Indiana Jones as an adventure story. You're following these characters through these various settings and locations and meeting new characters along the way. This film has a lot of energy. Even though it's 3 hours, it doesn't feel like 3 hours. The other films have that same energy, but they also focus a little bit more on the things that are set up in this film, i.e. battles and a little bit more drama and a little bit more character development and arc and dynamics. So this one is really a lot of fun from the get-go. And the thing that really stuck out to me when I first saw it was the prologue at the very beginning of this film, where they give you the whole history of the ring, and they set up this entire 3-film story in 7 minutes with this just brief little history segment, and it delves into a little bit of the prequel story, which is The Hobbit, and the way it just all ties together is very exceptional. And Peter Jackson, as the director, I mean, he deserved that Oscar for Return of the King. But I think they didn't want to give it to him 3 years in a row, so they just saved everything for Return of the King, which is the culmination of this story. The score for this film was composed by Howard Shore, and it really just exceeds all expectations. I believe he utilized over 100 leitmotifs across the 3 films, which are just little musical cues that tie into characters or settings. I had the opportunity to see this film at Radio City Music Hall performed with a live orchestra, and you don't know how good the music is until you see it performed live with the film playing as an accompaniment. There's stuff happening in the score to this film you don't even realize is happening unless you actually have the visual connection with the performance of the musicians. It really accompanies it tremendously well. Elijah Wood really is the star of this film. He plays Frodo, who is the main character. He is the protagonist. He is the one who has to basically endure all the hardships and the character that we are following through this story. And he does a great job of just carrying, especially this film. But I think my favorite character in this film is probably Gandalf, played by Sir Ian McKellen. He just brings a very strong presence to the character and a very believable quality to the character. He had just finished filming the first X-Men movie, so it was right in that time period where he was developing his on-screen persona, but he received a Best Supporting Oscar nomination for his portrayal of Gandalf in this film. It is very strong, it is very grounded, and it is pretty much the backbone of this particular film and of this particular story. I just love the way Gandalf comes across and all of his interactions with the various characters, whether they're in the Fellowship or whether they are supporting. I think one of the reasons that this film has endured over the last 20 plus years is because of all of the elements that were utilized during the filmmaking. It's not just a great story from a great source, and it's not just a great cast that performs it well. It's not even great special effects. It's all the techniques that come into the filmmaking, all of the visual tricks that were employed to make it as realistic as possible and as tangible as possible. This film really utilized a lot of tricks of the trade, and one specific trick that it really took advantage of was forced perspective. So they wouldn't have to rely on digital trickery to shrink the characters to appear as their appropriate character size. They had a lot of makeup that was actually applied to the creatures and to the characters. There are actual actors in that orc makeup that are giving performances for the most part, and they are all wearing armor, and they are all wearing their battle gear, and that was all fabricated by the costume department, by the prop department, by the wardrobe department. So it really has a very tangible quality, and it mixes it and blends it so well with the digital elements that it just stands the test of time in a way that not many films have since this one was released. This film is right up there with Star Wars insofar as its appeal and accessibility for audiences. It has a lot of drama and it has a lot of action, and the effects, of course, are also great. There are even a couple of love stories throughout this particular film series, so there's something for everyone, and it is definitely worth the time. So that's it for Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring. I really hope you enjoy this recommendation. If you have not seen this film, please check it out and let us know what you think. And we will be discussing it at length on the Visually Hidden Selects podcast, so be sure to tune into that. And until next time, see ya!